net. And while I was in the car on the way back to Richmond, I got 3 pull requests for typos in my code. And I promise you I didn't approve of them while I was driving, but I did approve of them before I went to bed that night. So it's pretty awesome to be able to make this information more accessible. But the main reason I'm doing it is not because I'm trying to show off my markdown skills. The main reason I'm doing this is because a lot of people say, hey, I want to go back to my organization, talk to my team members, convince my boss, stuff like that. And that's why I put all this stuff on GitHub so that if you want to make a Word document out of it, if you want to print it out, if you want to grab the PowerPoint deck and try, talk to people in your organization about it, I encourage you to do it because especially in the enterprise, bringing in new platforms, new frameworks, new techniques can be a little bit daunting. People say, oh, that's not the way we've done it before. But I promise you, what I'm going to show you today, you're not going to miss the old way. So let's get a couple goals for tonight. I'm going to talk to you really about the Microsoft Identity Platform. And what we're going to do is Microsoft Identity Platform pretty much replaces all of the, excuse my language for this, but all the crap that you used to have to write to authenticate with like Azure Active Directory or Microsoft accounts. It was ugly. Trying to search through the documentation, copy and paste 40 lines of code. It was a mess. I don't know. By show of hands, anybody ever worked with the Active Directory Authentication Library or ADAL? I apologize. It sucked out loud. So Microsoft rewrote all of that to one platform, one framework, pretty much how things happened when they rewrote all the identity stuff in ASP.NET to ASP.NET Identity, and now everybody loves it. They're trying to get the same love here. So what we're going to do the 3-step process to learning the new identity platform. First, I'm going to just show you what it is, talk to you about it, give you some, so you can understand the concepts and moving parts. And then I'm going to show you that it's all just REST APIs. So we're going to authenticate manually. I'm going to open up my browser and I'm going to open up Postman, and we're actually going to grab tokens and issue secure requests against APIs with no code. Then I'm going to show you how, you don't need to do that. We'll use the Microsoft Authentication Library, and we can wrap some of those steps up into either 1 or 2 lines of code. And then we'll go a step further, and I'm going to introduce you to a Microsoft Graph, which is kind of Microsoft's one API for everything. So everything you do on Microsoft 365, whether it's on the Azure side, whether it's on the Office 365 side, or whether it's in Dynamics, are all exposed through a single API. To the point where if you want to say, I want to get the last 10 emails that one of my team members received, obviously, if you have the permissions is everything, of course, but you can, it's the same API as you would go if I want to update my profile information in SharePoint, all one API. It's super clean the way they've done it. And I'll show you some tools so you can learn how to use the API. And I'll show you literally one-liners on how to query it. So that's the goal. So really just trying to answer a whole bunch of questions tonight. What's the identity platform? How do we authenticate manually? Can MSAL help us authenticate? How do we access the graph? And then is there an easy way to access the graph? I'm going through this part pretty quickly because I want to show the code, right? So identity platform is pretty much this control plane for everything in Microsoft. So if your organization is using Microsoft products, if they're using Office 365, if they're using, Teams, SharePoint, even if they're still using stuff like Skype for Business, it's all controlled through identity. And we tend to think of that as our organizational accounts. We've all used them. If our organization is using Microsoft some way, you have your organizational account, you log in, you see your portal, you see your organization branded experience. But what you're starting to see is third-party applications and single sign-on experiences. So we're going to Salesforce, we're going to Box.com, but we sign in with our company's credentials. So that introduces an interesting situation where if we can authenticate against Microsoft's identity pretty easily, then that should allow us to authenticate against any APIs that we use from a third party or any ones we deploy ourselves. Like, how sweet would it be to be able to give somebody an API that says, okay, you have to use an organization account that's federated with us, but you can use the same code you use for anything else, and then grab a token and call our API. You don't have to write custom code to implement identity either on you trying to authenticate or you're receiving authenticated requests. You can actually rely on that control plane for that. So you've seen the Azure Active Directory is kind of like step one to solve that problem. which is Microsoft provided identity service, and then you use it for third-party applications, first-party applications. Heck, you can use it to log in to the OS on your local machines or log into applications. So there's already an identity platform that Microsoft has provided for this. And then they even provided authentication library, which text is really small. I'm sorry about that. But it was messy. You had to like use different libraries depending on what you wanted to do. It just wasn't nice. So a lot of people tried it once and say, I never want to do this again. So Microsoft created what's called the Microsoft Identity Platform. I'm actually going to go to this link in a second. And by the way, this is why I shared all the links ahead of time so you don't have to take pictures. But they wanted to create a single stack for all identity requests across all Microsoft identities. I italicized that on purpose. That's not just your organizational identities. That's Microsoft accounts. It's an early beta and preview, but you can actually use the Microsoft Identity Platform with third-party accounts. So if you already federated like third-party Facebook, Google, Twitter identities into your AAD or Azure Active Directory, redundancy intended, you can actually use the Microsoft Identity Platform and authenticate against those too. The idea here is that they all implement OAuth, so they don't have to do anything different as far as the heavy lift. And so what the Microsoft Identity Platform does is it just gives you one control plane. Use their library, use their API endpoint, and then Microsoft handles, oh, you meant to go to a Microsoft account. Oh, you're trying to go to organizational account. Oh, you're trying to go to social account. So it kind of is meant to take a lot of the complexity out of this. So, you know, when things change, we want to add in new identity providers. We want to change who can sign into our application. I mean, how many times have you seen a website, somebody, we support Microsoft accounts today, and then 3 months from now, they add in a support for GitHub, and then they add in support. I think Azure just added in support for logging in with GitHub. So it's very common for people to add in new identities. Let me show you what this looks like. I'm going to go in, and the URL is the one I showed you. So docs.microsoft.com/Azure/Azure Directory, Active Directory, not Azure Directory, /develop. This is going to take you to the Microsoft Identity Platform documentation. So depending on what type of application you build, it has 3 or 4 types of breakdown, mostly 3. It gives you an overview of a scenario, how to do it in a programming language, and then samples you can download. So for example, if you want a web application that can sign in people, well, here's a quick start application, .NET Core, going to break down what it's doing, give you example code, even give you a solution that you can download from GitHub. It tells you what to replace the example code, and then it'll actually walk through the methods and say, this is what's being done in this application. Now, with ASP.NET, it's a little bit more complicated, but maybe you want to build something as simple as, I'm going to build a desktop application that calls a web API. Well, I can click this. I see that the workflow is my desktop application has to go to a Microsoft Identity Platform, grab a token, and then my application can call any type of API, whether it's Microsoft Graph API, API I provide, anything else, using that token as a bearer token, and it'll get a response. So this workflow seems simple. I could go download sample applications, and I can go look at this code, but we're going to actually build. So this is the final result of what we're going to do today. We're going to go the very tough and tired road of building this out manually, just because I want to get you all excited about this, right? So I need to show you a couple concepts before we can actually get to writing code. The first one I want to talk to you about is like authenticating. So the first thing we need to do is if we need to do any type of authentication on Microsoft Identity Platform, we have to create what's called Azure Active Directory application. An application is just something. It doesn't actually have a one-to-one correlation with actual applications you're writing, even though that's typically the pattern. An application is just something that has permission to access things via the Identity Platform. So you go into the Azure portal, you register an application. If it's a web application, you have to include a redirect URI because when the person logs in, Microsoft has to send them back somewhere. So obviously you want to send them back to your web application. And then they'll get the client credentials they need to authenticate against whatever service they want to call. They want to call Azure service. They want to call Active Directory. They want to call Microsoft Graph. They want to call third party. They want to call one of your first party services. The flow is the same. And there's a couple different types of applications. You have your web applications, which is the one we mostly see. Like think like ASP.NET applications. You have your web APIs. We've all seen those. The ones you might see less of, but just as important, is maybe SPA applications. So, web front ends built entirely in JavaScript with single page applications. That's perfectly valid application type in Azure AD. You have your native or mobile client. So think like a console application or a native desktop application or mobile app. And you have your daemon or services. So think like a Windows service that we might spin up to do something in the background. It needs to authenticate too, but the way we authenticate is different. Now, what's important about this slide and why I show it is that in real world, we don't have one application that authenticates with the cloud. What we tend to have is a series of applications that are all interconnected in this little web. Our front end talks to the middle tier, which talks to the back end tier. And they all need to authenticate up and down, but they're all different application types. And so the idea here is that you can do all of this with Azure Active Directory and the Microsoft Identity Platform. Now, do not memorize this slide. I promise you we'll come right back to it. But one of the things you're going to see come up, I'm not expecting you to read all of this, is that authentication has flows. Now, I showed you one of the first flows, which is we go to the identity platform, we get a token, and we call it a service. Now, that is a pretty simple flow, but there's other types of flows you can do. Like, for instance, an interactive flow will have us go to a website and the user use their keyboard and mouse to log in. A username password flow might have the user provide a username password to your application, and you ship that username password to the service to get authentication. You got the integrated Windows flow, which is, let's just grab the identity off the person's computer. So maybe you're at an organization, you all have Windows 10 desktops or laptops, and you already have your AAD account on that machine. Well, let's just grab it from the machine. No need to do the interactive flow or anything like that. You've seen some of these other ones, even though they might not look as familiar, like the authorization code flow is really good if you need to get a token on behalf of somebody else. You have your own client credentials flow, which is for service applications that need to authenticate, but they can't do any type of interaction. You have the device code flow. Anybody here ever used the Azure CLI? Two hands, all right. The Azure CLI back in the day was just a command line only experience. So if you need to log in, they would say, go to, I believe it's Microsoft.com/device login and paste in this code. You can actually implement your own device code flow. For instance, I just did this recently. I did an application that deployed on Raspberry Pis. Well, we're not going to have a full keyboard. Well, we could, but in this situation, we didn't have a full keyboard mouse experience. But I did have a command line access. So I got the code off the Raspberry Pi. I went to my mobile phone. I logged in, popped the code in, and then the Raspberry Pi's logged in. So all these flows are different ways people authenticate. And the way we authenticate is we just essentially go to this URL. So this is, I'm actually building out this. This is the most slides you're going to see all night. We go to this URL called login.microsoftonline.com, and we do stuff against it. We can either go to the common version or pass in a tenant ID. Tenant ID is the unique identifier for your Azure Active Directory. Again, redundancy intended. And then we have endpoints like OAuth endpoints. We have other endpoints like for SAML tokens. And we have URLs for specific actions. If we want to authenticate, essentially what we need to do is go to the authorized endpoint for login to MicrosoftOnline.com. We're going to have some query string parameters we have to provide. We log in using the website we already know. Then we look at the response. The response is going to have a unique code that gives us permission to go and acquire a token. It's also going to have a state parameter, which we can use if we trust but verify. If we want to make sure we don't have a situation where we don't know which response belongs to which person. We have a state parameter that we can use to track that. So if we're logging in, this is what our query strings look like. We have to provide our client ID, which is the name of our AAD application we registered, what type of response we want. Usually code is the one. That's the one we're going to do today. Where we want to go after we're authenticated. What do we want the response to be? Do we want the response to be a query string, or do we want it to be a form post? And then scope. Scope is one we're going to dig into a little bit deeper later. So I really want, let's start digging in. This is where I think rubber is going to hit the road here. So what I have right here is I have my Azure portal open. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go to my home and go to Azure Active Directory. Now, this is my real world C#run.net directory. So for everyone on Twitch or everybody on the internet, and these applications are going to be deleted pretty quickly. So you're not going to have a lot of permissions for very long. But we'll keep things pretty locked down. So I'm going to go into app registrations. And can everybody see this all right on the other end?
Yep.
Awesome. This is where things get really weird, because I promise you, this .NET user group, I promise you to teach you how to authenticate using code, and we're not going to use code for the first 15, 20 minutes, which I'm absolutely insane for this. All right, so I'm going to hit new registration. I'm going to register an application. I'm going to call this HRNUG. Now, who do I want to be able to access this? Now, this can be changed later. Do I want only people in my directory, which is a single tenant application? Anyone from any AAD directory, that's a multi-tenant application, or anyone from any AAD directory plus Microsoft accounts, which is multi-tenant and then some craziness. For now, I'm just going to go crazy here. Anybody can log in. Now, redirect URI. Notice it says optional here. If you're building a desktop or a client or a service application, there's nowhere to redirect because there's no user interaction. But if you're building an application with user interaction, you have to send that response somewhere. So since we're going to test with the browser, we're going to do that. And HTTP localhost is a perfectly valid response here. For a long time, they didn't allow that, and people just kept complaining, well, how are we going to test? They're like, you have to have a real URL. That defeats the purpose of testing. So we won. They allow us to do localhost now. I'm going to register this application. That's it. We're cooking. So here we go. I have an application AD. I have my tenant ID. This is a unique identifier for my whole directory. And then the client ID, again, a GUID, a unique identifier for this specific client. So the way we can build things out is we can actually build out our login.microsoftonline.com URL. I'm going to click endpoints here. You're going to see that I have lots of URLs depending on how I want to sign in. Do I want to do WS Federation? Do I want to do SAML? Do I want to do OAuth? I'm going to do OAuth, and I want to authorize. Now, this endpoint is for any organization, any unique identifier. Oh, wow. My 3-year-old just walked in the room. It's okay. y'all can laugh if y'all hear him say something funny. He's grabbing Christmas gifts and running and hiding and pretending he doesn't know where they are. All right. So we're going to go back into the browser and login.microsoftonline.com. Instead of common, I'm going to grab my tenant ID and just show you can do it either way. If you're doing this with multiple tenants, you use common. But if you're just only using one AAD tenant, you'll see your tenant ID. And that's our URL. And I have Visual Studio Code open. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pop this in here because I think it's a little bit easier to read here. Oh, that's zoomed in too much. A little word wrap so you can follow along what I'm doing. Now, we have lots of query string parameters we need to add. We already popped in our tenant ID here instead of common. I'm going to pop in my client ID. And if you look at the slide notes and the decks, all the links to actually explain where I'm getting these things from are there. My client ID is here. I'm going to grab that. There we go. And I'm going to do a response type. That's code. Remember, we set that. Where am I redirecting? My redirect UI. Well, I can do HTTP, and I can never remember this, so I'm going to copy and paste it. But you got a URL and code HTTP localhost. Good times. Y'all can read that code, right? All right, I see a couple head nods. Response mode equals query and scope. Now, I promise you I'm not going to go too deep into this yet. We'll go to a lot deeper later. But scope is what permissions do you want to grant? Some of them are easy to get, like reading your user profile. Some of them require elevation. So that means the first time you try to get a token for that permission, it's going to fail. And then somebody actually has to go into AD and application and say, you know what? I want to allow people to get that level of permission. So stuff like reading email, things like that, where it's going to require elevation. But here, we're just going to read our user profile. So user.read, I just memorized these, I do this so much. But there's so many, you could pass in multiple here. Matter of fact, when you do this in .NET, it's a list of strings. I'm going to copy this. And as long as I have no typos, we're cooking. So paste it, hit enter. Now, I'm already signed in. I could have signed out, signed back in, but I didn't see a point. It says I'm signed in using my Sidney and C#run.net. The HR NUG application has requested permissions. It wants to sign in and read your profile and maintain that permission. Now, I could consent on my behalf. If you're a directory administrator, you could consent on behalf of your entire organization. I'm just going to consent on my behalf. This is only going to work as long as the scope remains user.read. If I ever change the scope, I'll get this screen again. If the scope stays user.read, I don't have to go through this experience. It also lets me know that Sidney can't be trusted because I didn't provide terms for you to review. And it says, hey, we could change these permission stuff. So basically, I'm a bad actor. That's okay. Now, remember I said that response mode with query string? Notice it came back to localhost, but it came with gifts. You know, it's the holidays. So here's what it brought. Localhost, and it brought this big old code, and then a session state. This isn't necessary for you to use this platform, but there's actual state query string parameter. If you pass it in when you log in, it should exactly match when it comes back. If it doesn't match, you know there was some type of interception, something went wrong. So it's good if you have an application or platform that's handling a lot of logins on behalf of people. You want to match them up with the right responses. You can use the state variable. But for our purposes today, we don't need it. All we need is this sweet old code. So I'm going to grab it and pop it into another word-wrapped editor. Zoom out just a little bit for my own sanity. And now I can do something with this code. Now, the first thing I need to do is grab a token, a bearer token, because I mean, I can use this code with different platforms to authenticate, but if I want to do a regular REST API authentication, I need to convert this code into a bearer token that has a certain lifetime. And the way we do that is we go to a different endpoint. So we go back to applications. We did our authorization endpoint. Now we want to grab a token so we can actually access APIs, other APIs. Other than the identity platform, because all authorization does is authorize us with identity platform. Token gives us the keys to the kingdom to go access other stuff. So this is kind of like, I always say this is like unlocking your house, and this is like getting the keys to your spouse's car. Just because you don't got to unlock the house doesn't mean you can drive the spouse's car. But once you get the keys, oh well, you're driving now. So we jump in, and I got Postman open because I think Postman is the best way to show this. At any time, if I'm not zoomed in enough, just yell at me. I'm going to go to Postman, and I remember that we start with that login.microsoftonline. There we go, login.microsoftonline.com, OAuth v2.0. We go into the portal, we'll see instead of authorized, the endpoint is called token. So I'll do that. The reason I like to use Postman for this, because Postman has this really cool feature. I'm going to send a post request. I can send a GET request too, but for this, I'm going to send a post request. And then in the body of the post request for form data, got a nice little table. So I can just fill out stuff. So if I send a post request here, it's going to say, hey, you need stuff to call this. So it doesn't just outright fail. It actually tells me why it's failed. You need a grant type parameter. Grant type. Well, for this application, I need to get the grant type parameter. And I say, okay, what is grant type? Like, how does it work? What I need to put in there. So this is in the slide deck notes. I'm gonna Google it and just show you where you would get it from. This is the actual hyperlink you'll get when you go look at the slide deck. It actually explains to you what each of these parameters do. So grant type said must be authorization code. It's just saying that in the future they might have other grant types, but today the only one's authorization code. This allows you to get a token to access API. So authorization code. Send. Okay, now it needs a code. Oh, I got that one. Let's go to Visual Studio Code. Ah, there we go. I think I'm done. No? Oh, I need more stuff. A client ID. And I know these ones because I do this all the time, but I like to show you this is how I learned how to do this by just keep hitting the endpoints and getting the wrong thing and seeing the invalid requests. So I know to get my client ID, I'll go back into the actual portal, client ID. All right. So this is the part where I pretend we're good to go. And I know it's like 2 or 3 others. All right. It says, okay, we're almost there. But if you're going somewhere and this application requires a redirect UI or URI, you need to supply one. Well, that one's easy. Remember, it's HTTP localhost. All right, one more time. Okay, finally, in order to get a token, you have to know something about the application to prove you have permission to get the token. So you can either use an assertion or a secret. Well, I know how to create client secrets. I can go back to my application in the Azure portal, and under here, under certificates and secrets, I could create a client secret. I'm going to call this, do I trust HR Nug? And I'll trust y'all for a year. And there we go. We have a client secret. I'll copy that, jump back in, paste it, hit send, boom. I now have a bearer token. This bearer token can be sent as authorization header with obviously bearer in front of it to any of the APIs that I have permission to via the scope. And I know one API that I'm very interested in accessing. And I can go, just to show you as an example, I can go access it right now, and that's the Microsoft Graph. If I Google Microsoft Graph, and I'm Googling these on purpose, so all these links are in the deck, but just so you can see that this is how I found the documentation. They have the Microsoft Graph REST API reference. They even have documentation on how to use API, how to page results, how to query parameters work. And they say, okay, to call the Graph API, you need to call graph.microsoft.com. Okay. And it's just a GET request, so that's easy. You just supply a version. Well, I don't know what version is. Okay. Here's what version is. You either could go to the current version, v1.0, or the beta. Well, that's not too bad. Well, version 1.0. All right, what else do I need? You need a resource. Which resource are we trying to get to? I don't know. Well, it says here's some examples. You can go to a user, a group, a drive, a site, or you could just go to me. That sounds easy. Me. Okay. It has something else here. It says query parameters. Oh, these are optional. You know what? I don't care about optional stuff. I only do mandated required stuff. Now I need to authorize. So I go to authorization, bearer token, and one of the cool things about Postman already knew where the bearer token was because my last request or last HTTP request gave me a bearer token, but I'm just gonna pretend it did it and copy and paste it. Hit send. There we go. I have just queried my profile information from the Microsoft Graph. That's it. Now, when I go on the road shows for Microsoft and talk about the identity platform, they want me to show all the fancy .NET classes, but I think it's hard to really grasp what's going on unless you see it manually. So you saw the 3 steps. We went logged in by going to login.microsoftonline.com. Now, whenever you log into a Microsoft site, you're going to notice that URL is going to drive you crazy. It's login.microsoftonline.com. That's it. Then once we got the code, we went to get a token to access the APIs. And then once we got a token, we access an API. Now, today, we're just accessing the Graph API. But it could be any API. It could be one of your APIs. It could be a third-party API. It could be one of Microsoft APIs. The flow is the same. And so when I show you how to do this in code, you're going to notice the flow is very similar. As a matter of fact, let's kick that off now. So we have Visual Studio Code hyper zoomed in. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I'm do a lot with .NET Core, so I'm just have this open in .NET. So .NET new console. I'm gonna call this application Authenti. That sounds like a startup name. There we go. So I have a new console application here with a CS project file and a program.cs file. Now, I showed you the manual way to do it. Well, Microsoft has this thing called the authentication library, and it actually streamlines all of that. It makes it really easy. Oh, don't ask me stuff for Visual Studio Code. It makes it really easy for you to write this code. Before I bring in any libraries, one of the things I like to do, if you don't do this now, you should start. You can have asynchronous entry methods, starting with .NET Core 3.0. But technically, you could have did with 2.1, but it was ugly. Using system.threading.test. And now I can just call asynchronous methods all I want. As a matter of fact, when I spin up a ASP.NET project and they give me the boilerplate, it's not asynchronous. I actually change it to be asynchronous. There's no functional difference other than I don't like writing task.wait or any all the other stuff that you have to write when you have a static entry point that's not asynchronous. All right, now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a library. So we have the Microsoft Graph. We have the Microsoft Authentication Library I told you about. We're going to start with the Microsoft Authentication Library. So if I go to NuGet.org, I can type in Microsoft Authentication Library, but I already know the name of it. It's called Microsoft.identity.client. So the Microsoft Identity Client name gives you the MSAL. MSAL is Microsoft's Authentication Library. It's just a wrapper library for everything I showed you how to do manually. It's available in Java, Python, JavaScript, .NET, and iOS and Android. So packages available for all those platforms. They implement the features kind of concurrently. So you're never really in a situation where I grabbed it for one platform. It supports these things, but others doesn't. They work really hard to kind of make that not a thing anymore. So .NET add package, Microsoft.identity.client. Can you tell I do a lot of beta and alpha stuff? So it took a long time to find that NuGet package. Clear my screen and go to my CS project file. There's my Microsoft Identity Client. So from here, I can actually go in and start doing some really interesting things. Now, with the Microsoft Authentication Library, we have two concepts, and these concepts are called these concepts are called authentication providers or flows. So I showed you the MSAL SDK. Uh-oh, my screen's flipped on me. I blame the machine. I told you about all of this. We looked at it on NuGet, but we have these provider models. We have two types of applications. We have public client applications and confidential client applications. Public client applications are essentially applications that the user is just logging in themselves. Confidential client applications are applications where you're providing sub-credentials that needs to be secured to log in on somebody's behalf. So examples of confidential applications might be a web app calling a web API, or web APIs calling other web APIs, or service applications. Things that you tend to interact with, like device code, interactive login, like you just saw me do, those are public client applications. So the way we use this is we actually use this special class called a client application builder. Let me show you what that looks like. So it's a public client application builder. And I'll just add the namespace using Microsoft Identity Client. And from here, what we can do is we can actually call the static.create method. Now, for the create method, it's going to want a client ID. If these things start to look kind of familiar, that's by design. They want the actual SDK to kind of match exactly how you would do it manually. So client ID equals, not a question mark, Sidney, but this value. If I can find it, there we go. It's my client ID. And I'll pass it in here. Now, it's a fluent builder. So once you call create, you can start doing things. If you just call .build, that will work. But in our example, we might not want to call .build. We might want to set some parameters, set things up. So for example, all these methods you're going to see in documentation. All this, again, links are in the slide decks and the notes. They're called with methods. So for instance, if I want to set an authority might be what accounts we want to be able to log in. You might, well, what do you mean by that? So there's all sorts of types of Azure Active Directory accounts. They might be public cloud. They might be Gov cloud. They might be China cloud. They might be a foreign cloud that's not defined yet, but maybe defined in the future. It might be Azure Stack running on your own premise or facilities. The idea, or premises, excuse me. The idea here is that you can actually set an authority if you want to scope things. They have, I think, Azure Cloud Instance and some examples of authorities. We're going to just do public cloud. And it says, okay, if you want to scope it to just one organization, that means whoever logs in has to be a member of this organization. We need a tenant ID. Well, that's easy. A tenant ID is right here. I'll do another const string, private const string, tenant ID. At any point, if I'm typing too fast, just yell at me. I'll pass in my tenant ID. Now, just like when we did the manual login, remember, we can't interactively log in unless we redirect somewhere. There's a with method for that. With redirect URI, HTTP localhost. And that's it. We have our app. So I can say var app equals public client application builder, and I can start to do some cool things. Now, the coolest part about the MSAL platform is that they have classes for all the different ways you want to acquire a token. So just jumping back in here. If we want to acquire a token interactively, like going to the browser, we use a public client application, and we call acquire token interactive. If we want to acquire a token with device code, very similar code. Oh, I clicked on things too fast. We can acquire tokens silently. Sidney, when will you ever acquire tokens silently? One of the most common workflows you'll see is that we might call acquire token silent. So if the user is logged in and they still have active token that hasn't expired, acquire token silent will just get that token without any user interaction. If it fails, then we'll call acquire token interactive. And that's how we have persistent login across different sessions of maybe your desktop application. I used acquire token silent interactive with an application I built, believe it or not, to actually integrate with Sonos. I used the Microsoft Identity Platform and just changed the endpoints it was pointing to. So instead of pointing to Microsoft, I pointed to Sonos platform because OAuth is the same. So I could just use the same classes. I just change just a single string variable where it's pointing to. You can acquire it from integrated Windows off. You can acquire it by username, password. And then same thing for a confidential client application. If you have stuff already set up, you can use that too. So what does that look like? Let me show an example of that. Oh, sorry. So once we have our app, we just call to acquire token, and then whatever type of method we want to use, passing in the scopes for our token. Remember we talked about the scopes? And here we just pass in a string array, user.read, and then our access token is part of that auth result. So let's do that. So app.acquire token interactive. We need to pass in an enumerable string scope, so it doesn't have to be an array. I'm just I just kept that for brevity. Let's see. So acquire token interactive looks like it returns this thing called acquire token interactive parameter builder. So that means we need to call something else. Turns out we need to call an execute method. And just like with most other APIs you're going to see moving forward from the Azure team, everything's async by default. So we're going to have to put an await in front of that. And what is it going to return? An authentication result. So authentication result equals await app acquire token interactive execute async static. Oh, I forgot my async modifier. There we go. And then from there, I mean, we can get fancy with it, but only thing I need to do is call result.token. I can write that to the console. So console.writeLine x token. I'm going to use string interpolation here if you don't mind. Token colon tab result.access token. Just zoom in on that a little bit. So token with a colon tab, then print out my result.access token. Nothing too fancy here. Just some simple C#7. All right. If I did this right, .NET run. Fingers crossed. Open my browser. Now, because I scoped it to my organization, it automatically went to my organization's login experience. If I didn't scope it to my organization with my tenant ID, it will just go to the regular Microsoft Online login experience. You notice how I already passed in my tenant ID, OAuth v2 authorized. Notice all the parameters are almost exactly the same. This SDK is doing the same thing we did. Matter of fact, this is the demo that always breaks on me, right? I think I've done this before, and with my luck, it's not going to work today. But if I comment this out, I can't remember if that's going to break or not. Takes me to the regular Microsoft login. Notice the difference here is in login.microsoft.online.com or microsoftonline.com. Instead of my tenant ID, it uses common. That means I can log in with any organization's account. If I want to log in with my personal account or my org account. Once I click my org account, authentication is complete. Notice localhost came back with the code. If I go back to my .NET application, it crashed. So we're halfway there. What happened? Request body must contain the following parameter: client assertion or client secret. So it looks like something went wrong. It needs to send another request. And I'm saying, well, that's not right. Why can't I log in? From here, I did everything right. But turns out there's one thing you got to change if you're going to log in from a desktop or console application. And that's you got to change the type of application. Remember we talked about the application types? I didn't show you that diagram for no reason, I promise. When we go in here and we go to authentication, we'll see we have our application types. We could change them to be a desktop or mobile application. And more importantly, when we get into more advanced stuff, like for instance, if we want to do a device code authentication where we don't have redirects, we can set a default client type. We're going to do that here. Hit save. And now, if I did everything correctly, .NET run, sign in my application, return, there's my token. So all I did was just change my application type. Remember I said you could change it later? To say this is a desktop application. There's no actual browser to redirect or all this other stuff. It just needs to, it gets the token directly. So we're not going to print that out anymore. That's a little too long. How do we use that token? Remember earlier I showed you how to use the Microsoft Graph manually. Well, let's actually just jump back into that. So the Microsoft Graph is funny. That diagram I showed you about identity as a control plane, I actually stole it from myself. We use this diagram in the Azure Developer courseware. We teach you what the Microsoft Graph is. The Microsoft Graph is a graph database that exposes a REST API of all your connections on the platform, both for first-party and third-party applications. Now, it's not just exposed like, oh, anonymous requests. You have to authenticate in, you have to get permissions, applications. It's a lot of hand-holding on the permission side, which is a good thing. But what it means is that if you can use this workflow, you can query anything here. So for example, I can use the Microsoft Graph to get a list of all Windows 10 devices I put my organizational account on. I can use the Microsoft Graph to query all messages in my Teams channel. I can use the Microsoft Graph to get profile information updated. It's not just query, it's a REST API. So we could post, we could add, we could update, delete, patch, all that stuff is still there. We could do things like getting manager information. The Graph is pretty cool in that sense. It has a REST API. We've seen a little bit of this already. graph.microsoft.com/version/name of the resource, and optionally, because I don't like options, query parameters. You can go v1.0 for most things, and then there's a beta endpoint for things that are being added to the graph that are not ready for prime time. Here's some examples. You saw me do me. You go to me drive if you want to go query your OneDrive. Me messages, you want to query Outlook, or Exchange Online. You can go to user information, group information. It's a REST API. So you can go to user/unique identifier. As long as you have permission to actually view that information, you can go view it. So how do we call that REST API? We use ugly old HTTP clients. So I despise HTTP client, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person, but I've always despised HTTP client. HTTP client equals new HTTP client. And then from here, I believe it's client.default request headers authentic authorization equals new authentication header value, which requires me to add another namespace. Is type bearer, passing in our result.access token. That's so much code. I don't like it. We get our URL. Earlier when we were in Postman, we went to that me endpoint. So let's just do it again. Save that. And then we get our response. Well, await HTTP client dot get string async, passing in that URL. Console.write line response. I mean, this is as basic as it gets. Can y'all hear my excitement about HTTP client? I'm about to show you a way better way to do this. Sign in. There we go. That's my profile in JSON format. Now, it's minified, but it's all still there. Now, anybody, by show of hands, anybody here ever heard of Flurl? I'll probably mispronounce it. Oh, we got a fan in the back. You're going to love this. Flurl is a string manipulation library for building URLs. So think about how we use path combine and stuff like that. Imagine that for URLs. That's Flurl. Then they also have another library called Flurl.http that takes those URLs you built and sends HTTP requests. And the cool part about that is that if we were doing this all manually, it'd make it easier for me to go get the token. But let me go grab Flurl. So .NET add package, Flurl.http. Clear my screen. And then using Flurl.http. See all this? Ooh, it can go away. We got our URL, right? URL dot, and if I remember this correctly, it's, remember those with methods? With OAuth bearer token, result.access token, dot get string async. There we go. HTTP client could die in a fire. So what I do? Oh, I forgot my await. There we go. So we take our string. That's our URL. Flurl has other methods like you can add query string parameters like set query parameters, set query string parameters, other stuff. But all we did is call with OAuth bearer token, get string, awaited. There we go. Same thing. .NET run. Now you are all converted to the goodness of Flurl. And I'm probably mispronouncing it, but that's okay. Nobody cares but me. All right. And it returned the same result. That was fast. Now, what if I told you even that was too much code? So Microsoft has and by the way, all of this, every single line of code I'm showing you is in the slide deck. So I'm not showing you anything mysterious that coming up off the top of my head, even though I am a little crazy. But before I show you the faster way to do this, I want to show you what you can do with the Microsoft Graph. Because if we had to write all that code each time, we'd have a hard time. So this is a link you're going to see in the slide deck for the Graph Explorer. What is the Graph Explorer? It's an online portal that helps you learn the REST API for Microsoft Graph. And then you test out things, and it will fail if you don't have permissions, and it'll show you which permissions you need to set. Remember I told you I'll come back to scopes, how you get those scopes, how you get permission to go to things, what's in V1, what's in beta. It'll even give you the URLs so that once you're ready to query them, you can do that. So there's our graph.microsoft.com v1.0 me. First thing I do is sign in. Sign in with my Microsoft account. There I am. That's Sidney. Hit run query. Same JSON result. Now, what if I wanted to get my photo? So it's me photo value. It returns a picture. My email. Me messages. Don't read my email, right? Oh, it's okay. None of this is important. Stuff in OneDrive. There we go. I don't have a manager, so it's going to fail. What's trending around me? Well, I was reviewing my brother's resume for a couple of weeks, so I guess that's trending. He sent it to me. I reviewed it, so we now have social media buzz within our organization. Do I have any skills? Nope. Oh, poor me. What if I want to look up a user by email? All right. Well, maybe I'll look up my brother. Yeah, this is kind of cool. What do I have in Planner? I've never used Planner before. Nothing. That makes sense. So I'm showing you this because like the cool thing about this is you can just see how I can query. I'm on one team within C#Run.net. I can go. I can create a channel. Let's see. My joint teams. There's another one I want to show you. All right, let me show you how we find even more stuff. So this isn't the full list. If you click here at the bottom to show more samples, look at all these things you can do just in the Graph Explorer. So for instance, this is getting fun. I want to see all the stuff you can do in Outlook. Maybe I want to see, I have OneNote notebooks. I want to see what that is. I have a SharePoint site. Security stuff. Okay. Notifications. What is that? Let's play. So I'm going to jump in. So Outlook and emails with a high importance flag. How does it find that? So it calls me messages, filter importance equals high. Okay. I go in, I see somebody sent me an email about some work that I need to get done. Let's just pretend I didn't see that. All right. What if I just want to get the headers for emails? Or Outlook categories. Uh-oh. I can't get my Outlook categories. What's wrong? So it says 403. Looks like I don't have permissions. So if I hit modify your permissions, here's all the permissions. Remember those scopes I told you about? That I can use. So technically the Graph Explorer is the application. And these are permissions I consent it to. So how do I find out what permission I need for this? So this is the Outlook categories. So we go to my Outlook categories on the right-hand side. If you click it, it takes you to the documentation page. Has documentation never been so sweet? And it says, okay, in order to list your Outlook categories, you need to call mailbox settings.read or have that, that scope. So if I go in here, hit modify my permissions, I'm going to look for mailbox categories.read. They're in alphabetical order, Sidney. You should have found that. Did I pass it? Mailbox settings? Oh, there we go. Mailbox settings. I'm going to just give it read right. So hit modify permissions. Now watch what happens. When I log in, the Graph Explorer has requested expanded permissions beyond what I've given it in the past. You saw I consented to a couple things before. Yeah, sure. You can read my mailbox settings. So I still, as a user, have to give permission. So even if you write an application to read your coworker's email, they have to consent to it. So they can't blame you if you get to see the email. They approved of it. So now we're going back in here. Go to get my Outlook categories, and there we go. There's all my categories. I have categories for different colors. So it's really interesting, that relationship between what requests you can create and scope. And it's just like mobile applications where people have to consent to expanded permissions. If you're doing it over yourself, if you're doing it over other people, they have to consent in order for you to run those queries. Whew. Okay. So let's actually do something with this. And the way we do that is we use the Microsoft Graph SDK. So I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about that. The Graph SDK is essentially just a SDK available on NuGet. There's two libraries you have to pull down. There's the Graph SDK, Microsoft.graph, and then the Graph SDK Authentication Integration Library. Who does a mouthful? The Graph SDK is the one that you use to actually query the graph. The Graph Auth library is actually used to plug into MSAL. So you can actually take a client application for MSAL, pass it into the Graph Authentication client, and boom, you don't have to do anything else. And so think of the Graph.auth library as plumbing code for you, because nobody likes writing plumbing code. So let's pull that down. So we have our Visual Studio Code application. We're going to .NET add package. Microsoft.graph, then .NET add package, Microsoft.graph.auth. Now the second one's going to fail. It says, Microsoft graph.auth, this isn't working. So let me go to NuGet.org and figure out why. Actually, I want to keep that tab open. I can ignore that. So go to NuGet.org, Microsoft.graph.auth, and I click on here. Turns out that I have to pull down a preview version. And so in .NET, you have to actually specify a preview version if you want it. I'll just go pull that. Say I will pull down preview version. So technically, graph.auth hasn't been released yet. It's all one of the things I'm actually really proud of this year. There was a side project for a Microsoft team they were working on, and I really needed it for a project, so I just went and finished it. And they were like, because it's literally the whole thing, the whole GitHub project's maybe 20 classes, so it didn't take that long. It was a little bit of regex work. And then once it was done, we tested it, and so we're waiting for it to release. But it's just to show you that you don't have to be anybody special or anything. If you see something and you think you get approval with the Microsoft team doing, you can do it. Now, I will admit, it took 2 months for the PR to get approved. I had to go through 4 different reviewers. But it's in there. So, yeah, the code you're using with Microsoft.graph.auth, I wrote that stuff. I'm telling you, if you're scared of digging into Microsoft's like GitHub repos, just jump in. I didn't have to ask for permission. I didn't have to know somebody on the inside. Matter of fact, I still haven't met most of that product team, but they treated me like everybody else. When I did the PR, they helped me fix up some things. They made me do another PR to update the documentation because you can't update code without updating documentation. But it was a wonderful process, and I highly recommend it. You give it a shot if you can. All right. All that said, we're going to delete all of this. Graphs are using blocks. So using Microsoft.graph, using Microsoft.graph.auth. And then we don't need Floral anymore. I'm going to miss you. We don't need System.net anymore. I miss you too. I don't even know if we need System anymore, but we'll hang on to that just in case. Because you never know. Now, for every type of authentication flow, they have a provider. So I'm going to use the interactive authentication provider. We'll call it provider equals new interactive authentication provider. That's a mouthful. Let's just var that out. Now, I need to pass in a public client application. Oh, I got that. And I have numerable scopes. I got that too. Then graph service client equals new graph service client. Pass in your provider. That's it. That's all the plumbing code. So now we have access to graph service. Do I want to make a request to graph service? Sure, I do. Client.me.request. I'm going to get the user variable. So user, I'm going to call it me equals await client.me.request. I get AC. I will admit the syntax is a little funky, but you get used to it pretty quickly. It's whatever the endpoint resource names are. Those are actual properties. So input client.me.messages .requests or client.me.request. Now, if I look at this, it returns a task user. So I'll put it in a user variable. And that's really it. Console.writeLine. Do I have my mail address? Yeah, me.mail. Let's open the browser. Go back. Here we go. Wrote my email out to the screen. We can do more fancy queries. If you already know link, then this is gonna just be super smooth for you. Let's do await client.me.messages. I'm gonna create my request object. Then I'm gonna select I'll just use a variable called m or message. I don't know if anybody else has this problem. Can never select the variables they want. Only thing I want to get is the sender and the subject. And then, so message.subject, message.sender.email address. It says unexpected : or I can order it by received, date, time. I just know this one. You can go into Graph Explorer, see the properties you can order by. Call get AC. See. Oh, it's an anonymous type. I need to new it up. There we go. I can even go as far as like sender equals, subject equals. I mean, it's anonymous type, so you can get as crazy as you want to get with this. Var messages equals for each var message in messages. So, just regular old C# will loop through all the messages. Console.writeLine. Let's interpolate the strings. So message.subject sent by message.sender. Let's see, any typos? Probably not. Anonymous type of lambda expression may only be initialized with direct members of type message. So I'll just do this, message.sender.email address. Basically saying that we have to use direct properties of the message class. People who are much smarter in .NET, everybody look at Kevin, can probably explain why I get that error message. So a couple problems. Turns out I before E is not true for the word received. It's E before I. That. All right, let's see. Access is denied. Anybody know why access is denied? I don't have permission. So we're going to go back into the Graph Explorer. This is my life when I'm actually writing this code. I need to get my messages. See, it was under Outlook. Want to get messages. I'll just do me messages, run query. And so in order to run messages, let's go to documentation page. So let's see, list messages. What permissions do I need? Mail.read or read basic or read write. I'll do mail.read. Now it's not case sensitive, so mail.read should work just fine. .NET run. Notice I'm getting real tired of clicking on my name. We're going to fix that. HR Nug has asked for more permissions. Who did this? Accept. There we go. I get a lot of emails. Slight schedule shift. Slight schedule shift. Slight schedule shift. That's not slight when it happens like 3 times. I think it's on purpose. There you go. Those are my most recent emails. So hopefully that's not really important. Now, the last thing I want to show you is that you can actually take advantage of a lot of this information that we went over to implement other things. Like, let's say you want to implement another authentication flow. One of the ones I told you about was the one for Azure CLI, like the device code flow. Let me show you what that looks like. So everything stays the same, except we don't need a redirect URI since we're not using a browser. And we'll use new device code authentication provider. And it's going to complain. It says, hey, new device, Microsoft. Sorry. IntelliSense is failing me. Device code provider. There we go. Device code provider. It's still going to fail because it's going to say we need something else. And what we need is a callback. So this is weird. I want you to think about what a device code flow means. That means my console application is going to print a message that says, Sidney, use some other device to go to Microsoft.com/device login, paste in this code, and then log in there, and I'll wait. So that means our application is going to have to wait. In order to do that, we need asynchronous callback. So let's do it. So async, whenever the prompt is shown, run this code. And you could pass in a method or something like that. But here, I'll just say we will call await console.out.writeLine async. Something is happening. But actually, we want to write out something else. Console.out.writeLine async prompt.message. That prompt has all sorts of information, but the message is the one we care about. So theoretically, if I did this correctly, everything else can stay the same. I'm just for simplicity's sake, we're just going to go back to client.me. So client.me.request.getAsync var me. We're just going to write out my email again, because why not? Me.mail. It's just a simpler example. All right. So the only thing I changed was really we're just simpler request, and we're using the device code provider now. So if I got this right, .NET run. Something is happening to sign in. Use a web browser. Go to Microsoft.com/device login. Here's your code. Oh, I hit Control-C. So I was bound to do it. We went too long without a bug. Here we go.
Yeah, it's happened to me before.
Microsoft.com device login. That's not the code. I'm going to go full grandparent here. Just type it in manually. There we go. You'll be signed into HRNUG on a remote device or service. So I've actually used device code extensively with devices where I don't have a browser available in IoT applications. Signed into HRNUG application on your device. You now close this window, printed my email, everything's good to go. So this is what usually at the end of a user group talk, somebody says, well, I'll give you a little bit to start, but there's a huge rabbit hole to dig into. Well, the cool thing about Microsoft Identity Platform, that was the rabbit hole. The hardest part of the platform is really just the Graph Explorer. Just going through the Graph Explorer, figuring out what you want to query, and figuring out the appropriate scopes. Figure out the scope, what you want to query, and then what method you need to call. A couple of cool things is going to help you out here. We have the Graph Explorer. Let me close all tabs, all right? If you click those hyperlinks, I actually show you how to use the REST API to call these things, which permissions you need to have. If you click use the SDKs, it'll actually show you, if you click create requests, examples of requests you can create using SDKs. Notice all my examples came exactly from here. It's cool because the biggest thing about this is that it's all documented. It's all here. There's no mystery or magic sauce. It's pretty simple to get up, started going. As an example, one of the things I started doing is this is my work computer. So my Sidney C#run.net account is automatically logged into the computer. So one day I just said, well, why don't I just use the integrated Windows provider? Because why do I need to log in? And I had to specify which, I think I spell it. Microsoft.graph.auth.integrated Windows authentication provider. Because, of course, the names can't be consistent. That would not be the Microsoft way. All right. And here you pass out client application scopes, and then it uses whatever identity you're already logged in as. And that was it. That was the only change you need to make to application. Microsoft Identity Platform is really about just making it easier for you to build this stuff in for your applications. And when I was talking earlier, this is not just for authenticating to the graph. If you have your own application, that first link I showed you to the Identity Platform documentation shows you how to secure like your web API projects. So somebody has to use this code if they want to connect to it from another .NET Core project. it shows you how to use the identity platform within ASP.NET Identity. So if you wanted your like ASP.NET front end to use identity platform logic to get us token, and then the web API backend to verify the token, all that sample code is there along with GitHub projects and breakdowns of how these individual pieces work. That was the very first thing I showed you. It's docs.microsoft.com/Azure Active Directory develop. They actually show you, remember those application types we talked about? All the different application types and how you can work with them. The ones that most interested in me is building web applications to call web APIs. So we get, again, that same level of security, same level of identity validation. Whether it's all the way through, that means we get the integrated Windows identity for the person on the machine. Let's say it's a work web application. We pass it all the way through the web API on the back end. All of this is broken down in these scenarios. So the challenge is really just digging in, figuring out the application types, figuring out how to integrate this with the platform of your choice, whether it's .NET or whether it's some other platform, just go and have fun. I promise you, once you kind of dug into the Graph Explorer a little bit and start messing stuff up, you're going to have that's where it really explodes for you. Lots of information about this out there. There's they have a Twitter account. I believe it's twitter.com. Microsoft Graph. Now I'm nervous that I don't know what it is. Yep, it's Microsoft Graph on Twitter. That's the product team. They love people talking to them about there. They also have a Twitter account for Microsoft Identity Dev, which is this MSID Dev, which is, that's a horrible name. But this is the other side of it. This is the people who worked on the identity platform. These people are, if you have questions about, okay, how do I integrate with different features? A lot of the people who are using this, believe it or not, are people who are building Office 365 applications because they have to know the identity platform to connect to the graph and then to build integrations. So, for example, one of the scenarios we worked through was how to build a Teams bot that lets us know when we're using GitHub Actions for CI/CD. Let us know the status of GitHub Actions and to flag certain people. We went as far as the bot could actually put a meeting invite on your calendar if the CD or CI build fails. Not saying you should do that as an organization, but you could. And that's the whole idea here is that now the graph kind of exposes APIs for all those individual Microsoft services. So if you want to integrate them in with stuff you're building, it used to be back in the day, if I wanted to integrate things in, it was just very difficult. I'll tell you, I've written some OpenXML code for like Word and stuff. This is just a much smoother way of doing it. So the last thing I want to show you tonight, thank you so much for your patience dealing with me with the whole nasally voice and everything, and being remote. But lots and lots of links. Again, this is in the slide deck, but and I'll post the link to the slide deck in the meetup group. So every single thing I showed you is in one of these links. So if you actually do the links in order, this first link was is that Microsoft Identity Platform documentation landing page. The second link shows you how to manually authenticate if you just want to authenticate with browser Postman like we did. The third link says, okay, here's how to use MSAL. The fourth link shows here's how to use MSAL on a device without a browser for device code. Here's how to call a web API. Here's the Graph Explorer. Here's some examples of things you can do with the Microsoft Graph. And here's how to create a Graph client. And here's how to create a request with the Graph. So you can actually just walk through all this yourself. The code's in the slides. Thank you so much, Itai. That was a lot of information. So, questions?
Questions? How do you do it on-prem?
So that's a great question. So on-prem, you have Active Directory for your identity platform. So the answer today is they don't have a path. The answer tomorrow is keep your eye on Azure Stack. This is actually public, but what they're trying to do is they're rolling out, like, it's not Azure Active Directory, but Azure Active Directory endpoints for AD on-prem, because there's a lot of customers using Microsoft Azure Stack who, oh, sorry, I'm facing the wrong way, cameras over here. A lot of customers using Microsoft Azure Stack who are using AD on-prem but don't want to use AD. So they're trying to fulfill that gap now, but I tell you, most of the development work is around AD. but the code for identity platform stays the same. It's really just them making that connection on the back end. So when they do make that connection, you'd be just pointing to a different tenant or different audience, but the actual identity platform code stays the same. Uh, the other thing you could do is if you didn't want to wait, there are third parties who implement OAuth endpoints for on-premises Active Directory. And if you use one of the third-party products, they're paid products, unfortunately. But they're used a lot if you like want to integrate on-premises Active Directory like Box.com or Salesforce and stuff like that. If you use one of those third-party products, then yeah, identity platform work. You'll just have to point it to a different URL to that third-party product instead of using the built-in URLs pointed to Azure Active Directory. But that's mouthful.
Drew?
So is there any way for, say, a business that's selling web applications to programmatically get those application IDs and all that, set up the application so that, say, the administrator of the new site can go in, click a button, authenticate, and boom, your application's registered? Or does it all have to be done manually?
So yes, there's a .NET SDK for actually interacting with Azure that allows you to go in and set up these application registrations in advance. That's the old answer. The current answer is you can actually use the identity platform to authenticate with Azure Active Directory. They use the old Active Directory SDK. Since all the authentication code is stripped out, it's a lot better. And they use the Active Directory SDK in .NET to create your application registration. So the first half identity code would be the same. The second half, when we do graph queries, instead of that, you just use the Active Directory SDK. That's another option. The third option is you might not want, it depends on what your business requirements are. And they're always going to be the same permissions. You might not want to create multiple application registrations. You might want to create a single application registration that supports multi-tenant usage, whereas each individual user uses a different tenant. And so remember, when you pass in the tenant ID, we actually did the identity platform code, you just swap out that tenant ID. You still use the same one application registration, but just with different tenant IDs if you're onboarding new customers. That's a very common workflow you see with people who build SaaS applications. It's a little bit beyond my expertise on it, but it's actually on the identity documentation. There's a example of how to build a multi-tenant SaaS application using an identity platform where the tenant ID can change. The third answer to that is if it's not tenants where you have corp-to-corp tenants, and then they have AAD tenants, but you actually just bring in individual identities, then it all works on one tenant. So it's a little bit of you got to have a little bit of experience with AAD, whether you want to go multi-tenant or single tenant with third-party identities, but all those scenarios are supported.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was kind of like a lot of information. Where's the best way to look more into identity if you're not very sure? Because I just learned ASP.NET recently. I'm trying to understand identity so I can use it in my web app.
So there's this website called Microsoft Learn. If you just Google it, it's just hands-on tutorials allow you to get into the Azure portal, try things out. They have a security track. And I'm glad you asked that because a lot of people don't want to ask that. But we actually have this problem where there are security experts, and specifically Azure security experts in the industry, but they tend to come from the IT pro world. So they know security, they know AD like the back of their skins because back in the olden times, we say olden times like it wasn't 3 years ago, IT pros were the only people who messed with AD and nobody else did. But now Azure Active Directory is not AD in the cloud. It's an identity service with a REST API. So who owns identity now? Developers. And so you have this weird gap in the industry that Microsoft's actually, that's one of the things they talk about inside our dev tour. They were like, let's add more developer security sessions. They did it at Ignite. We had 3 times the developer security sessions we've ever had because there's nobody in that space right now. It's a whole empty space. where the only people who know security IT pros, and IT pros don't want to learn .NET or Java, and then the developers don't know security because the job didn't require them to learn security. So I'm glad you asked that, because that is definitely a needed industry. And the people who are going to get the most out of this are like, I don't want to assume, I'm assuming everybody in this room has done some development. I'm hoping everybody in this room does some development. But developers are really going to be the people who inherit the security task, because the complexity, a lot of that complexity has been removed. And then two, a lot of applications are insecure because it was too difficult to implement security. But now that everything follow patterns, everything has providers, the idea here is that, okay, the application should be secure by default. So go to Microsoft Learn. There's a security track. They'll teach you from just fundamentals perspective what Azure Active Directory is, what tenants are, how do you create accounts, what's the difference between a single tenant, multi-tenant, what's the difference between first-party identities, third-party identities, what's the difference between organizational account, Microsoft account. Once you have those basics, a lot of the language you'll see in the documentation for identity platform will make a lot of sense. Again, the identity platform itself is not complex. It's just learning the lingo for the security side is. And then people who know it don't want to learn the right code. So there's opportunity here is the way I put it. That's kind of why I got excited about it and started doing work in this space, because I'm getting some consulting gigs that other people have passed up over this specifically.
Olden days. I'm thinking back in the days of yore, I used to summon the great beast Kerberos to do my bidding.
This is way better than LDAP code.
Yes,
promise.
Anyone else? So we'll leave the stream up. So if you want to come talk to Sidney personally, you can, like right there. But first, again, big thanks to Vaco for food tonight. Thank you all so much. And Joseph, you got an award for hanging out through the whole meeting. Yeah, they leave after the announcements. So hands up to you. We have a couple giveaways.
And a big hand for our presenter.
Yeah, huge hands for Sidney. So we still have your water bottle. It's in so Drew is this gentleman right here. He is
I know Drew. He's hiding my water bottle.
So he has your water bottle. If you want it back, you gotta see him. All right, what do we got, Drew?
Grab bag of mystery.
Mystery bag. All right.
T-shirt, various sizes, various marketing material on it.
Okay. If it doesn't fit, you can trade in for another one.
Hat, nice hat, blue, big
Native
N on it.
Native script?
Native script,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
And USB battery bank, currently dead.
Charges in about 6 hours.
Yeah.
We'll charge exactly 1/4 of an iPhone.
Not exactly a high capacity one.
No. All right. Last 3 digits, 363. All right, we have a winner. All right, 1.
What do you want?
Let's go mystery bag.
Mystery bag.
Hey.
Should toss it something breaks.
All right. 361.
361.
361. Last 3 digits. Someone has it. Really? No? All right, going once, going twice. All right. 350. 350.
Okay,
I mean, you don't have to take anything.
I'll take that.
All right. Last 3. 365.
Oh, that's me.
Hey.
Sure. I think better.
All right.
Can't have enough of those.
No.
That's one they only last 2 hours.
They're good for the hurricane boxes.
All right. Last but not least, 355.
That's me.
What would you like, Greg?
Well,
What shirt it is?
You know what? You can go back with Drew and pick whatever you want. All right. Well, thank you all so much for hanging out. Thank you, Sidney, again.
Hey, Kevin, you mind if I make one more point?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Ignite the Tour is coming to Washington, D.C., February 6th to the 7th. I don't think it costs anything. It hasn't in the past. So registration is open now. We have lots of people there talking about stuff. Even though I'm not talking about this there, if you had questions about Ignite the Tour and you just want to come and chat with me about it, oh, sorry, not Ignite the Tour, Identity Platform. If you have questions about Identity Platform, I'll be there as a speaker. So
And they're not canceling this one, right?
no, that was Insider Dev Tour. Ignite the Tour is big time.
Some people are on my list now.
Yeah, this is Azure Gov. So on this, big money for Azure Gov Cloud.
All righty. Thank you, Sidney. All right, thank you, everyone. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Take a cookie.
Take 5 cookies.
Take 5 cookies. Or come up and talk to Sidney. And thank you, everyone on Twitch watching. I'm going to turn off the stream. So.